Hi, I'm Tony Russo, and this is In Case You Missed It from Kates-Boylston for the week ending Friday, December 6th, 2024. Before we get started, I do want to invite you to come to our virtual event. It is the HR and Leadership Forum set for Tuesday, December 10th from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m., and it will feature Wanda Sizemore, the onboarding specialist of Envision Strategic Partners, and Spencer Larkin, that company's co-founder and CEO. If you listen to the audio version of this, you'll know Wanda from a bonus episode a couple weeks ago, and that was a really great talk. And one of the things that I liked about that particular talk was it got you enough of a taste that even if you don't get a chance to come to the virtual webinar, you know it would be worth your while to sign up and then watch it at a later time. This is going to be a great event, and we'd love to see you there. I will be hosting, so you can register. Find a link in the show notes. As you may know, this video and audio podcast is based on stories that I've been posting for the last several days. I post them during the week, and then I do a summary, which is this video. The reason I'm telling you that is some of this stuff is a little bit older because I didn't do a video last week. And I'm also letting you know that if you are a subscriber to any of our publications, you can see these for free as they come out. If you're following us on Facebook, that's a great place, especially if you're following FSI on Facebook. That's a good place to see these. One of the things I don't ever talk about, but I like to mention on here occasionally, is we publish obituaries of funeral directors as they come across my desk. And I don't do the reading of the obituaries. I don't know if it's for obvious reasons, but for, I think, reasons of clarity and sanity. As they like to say, it's not really something to read or to elaborate on. There's nothing more to elaborate on than is in the obituary almost all the time. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that I'm not going to get to all of the stories this week that I have posted because I've posted a bunch over the last 2 weeks. So I'm picking out the ones that I like the best. If you go to Kates-Boylston.com and click on Funeral Service Insider and then on In Case You Missed It, ICYMI, you'll be able to see all the stories and scroll and see if there's anything you missed that you wanted to see. This one I wanted to save because I just got a huge kick out of it. It's the wrong way to put it, but stay with me. There was an incident at the New Park Cemetery in Memphis, Tennessee. 3 workers were fired, and in their anger at being fired, they got in the company truck and drove it straight through the graveyard. So they knocked over more than 170 headstones. And there's nothing amusing about that at all. But what is amusing and a little bit interesting is that the funeral home or the cemetery ownership has decided not to press charges, and it makes you wonder whether or not he wants them talking about why they got fired. And there's no good reason to drive your truck through a cemetery, and I'm certainly not even kind of siding on the guys who did the damage, who damaged graves. There's no excuse at all, full stop. I would love to know why they got fired, and I would love to know why the ownership doesn't want them to pay, doesn't want any punitive measures taken. I mean, I guess firing them is enough, but I mean, if you drive a truck in a graveyard, there are other graveyards that almost certainly will hire you. It's a job that people, need to have done. So anyway, keep your eyes on it. I'll keep my eye out for news about New Park Cemetery. They may change their mind. The police have their names, and if they feel that the crime is sufficient, they don't need the ownership to press charges. So we'll see what happens with that story. But I wanted to bring it up because of the mysterious non-prosecution of an awful crime. Speaking of stories that we have been following on and off, a Bellingham, Washington funeral home, Moles Farewell Tributes and Crematory, has been exonerated in a mishandling of human remains case. We talked about this a while ago, and they have been going through the process of arguing their case, and they have won it according to the Washington State Funeral and Cemetery Board. If you recall, the Moles Farewell Tributes and Crematory had let the county coroner use their facility to store human remains in between their autopsies or their collection and getting sent to other funeral homes. And earlier this year, they had some bodies dropped off and not refrigerated. And when Moles asked the coroner, should we refrigerate these? The coroner said, no, someone's coming to pick them up. Don't touch them. And then no one came to pick them up. And so there's a lot of finger pointing. In the end, the coroner took the blame and is no longer with them. There's an interim coroner, Dr. Aldo Fusaro. He was confirmed by the Whatcom Washington County Council, as a new medical examiner in November 6th, well after this incident. The other reason I want to point it out, and I'm probably going to do a story, or you may see a story in American Cemetery and Cremation. There's a really interesting case in Canada, Nova Scotia, where a funeral director cremated the wrong body and argued that the hospital brought him the wrong body, and it wasn't his responsibility to make sure that the hospital brought him the correct body. And he won that case and got his license back. And there's kind of a kerfuffle going on over it, because there's a difference between checking and not knowing that it's the wrong body and not checking. And what many are arguing in the Nova Scotia case is that if they just say this is John Doe and you say okay and you put John Doe in your retort, then you have some culpability. And right now that is not the case according to this latest ruling. I'd be interesting to see if that stands in the long term. And the other thing that's interesting, and we're doing some stories about this as well in the coming months, is the disconnect between the people who are doing the delivering and the people who are doing the accepting. Even when funeral homes go to a hospital or to a hospice, and they can only trust that they're being given the right body if the names are correct. And with all of the talk about making sure that body tracking is done at the funeral home, one wonders how many more incidents like the one in Nova Scotia would it take to trigger a wider tracking solution where whatever number you are at the hospital or at the hospice is also the number you are when you go to the funeral home. I don't think that is way out of line, and I think that we may hear some more about that, if not in 2025, maybe by 2026. But I'm seeing these cases come up occasionally between the coroners and the hospices and the funeral homes where there's where in the case of confusion, everyone thinks it's everyone else's job to do the verification. And I don't know how sustainable that is. But more on that as the year progresses. And in a section that I'm inventing just for this week called Scales of Juxtaposition, there were two announcements about unclaimed remains being buried by cities this week. Los Angeles will have is on December 12th. Yes. So we'll have its annual unclaimed remains ceremony where it will inter more than 1,800 people who have been unclaimed in 2024. It's being live streamed. If you're interested in seeing what a live stream of a mass burial looks like, we have that link in the story, and the link to the story, of course, is in the show notes. But I would like to also tell you about the Bozeman, Montana mass burial for unclaimed remains. I believe it's called Gallatin County, Gallatin County in Montana, is going to inter the 66 people that have been unclaimed since 1922. And I got both of these stories back to back, and it just, the difference between the number of unclaimed in a year and the number of unclaimed in 100 years between these two cities is just staggering. That's why I thought it would be worth sharing. Links to both of those stories in the show notes. Another story we've been following for, maybe even more than a year, has come to a close, and that is the story of the Amigone funeral home in Tonawanda, New York, which has been ordered to close its crematory. The quickest rundown of the facts I can give you, in case you don't remember them, because I've done like 3 or 4 of these on this particular funeral home, is there were complaints about the funeral home having occasional black smoke, and the funeral home was hoping to relocate. Now, when they had put their in New York, funeral homes can't have crematories unless they had them before the law banning them was passed, and Amigone was one of Amigone was one of them. And so what they were hoping to do was to keep that permission and build a new facility. The state said, no, you're not building a new facility. And you know what? While we're talking about it, we're revoking your privilege to continue to run a crematory in the area. It's a very, very NIMBY thing, and there's nothing to be done about it. But there is a question about access to cremation in New York, and I've mentioned this, and it was mentioned in the story, which is linked in the show notes. They have plenty as long as there are no pandemics, which is a continuing issue, because when they have, during the pandemic, New York famously had to ship bodies all over the place. And that was with, the several crematories that have been closed open. So it'll be interesting to see how this works going forward. And on the flip side of that, it's been about a year, I think, since New York passed its NOR legislation, legalizing natural organic reduction. But New York is also one of those states where a funeral home and a cemetery can't be owned by the same entity, and that cemeteries are the sole entities that can be responsible for disposition. So with the exception of, Amigone and funeral homes like it, crematories are at cemeteries. NOR is a form of disposition, but when they wrote the law, they left wiggle room for it not to be put under the purview of cemeteries. And this is going to be an interesting kind of sorting period where they figure out whether NOR comes under cremation or not. And one wonders what implications that would have for aquamation. And for context, crematories were banned because of the smoke and because of the purported, ills that cremation causes. But alkaline hydrolysis doesn't have that issue, and it's also a smaller machine, so it could fit. Like in a city like New York, you could have an alkaline hydrolysis machine that essentially provided, cremation on premises if that were legal. So depending upon what happens with NOR, it'll be interesting to see whether or not there's any wiggle room once the floodgates open following whatever happens with natural organic reduction. And if anything interesting happens, we will tell you about it here. So make sure to subscribe wherever you're listening now. I'll tell you again after the after the rest of the show. I rarely do stories from the UK, although I see them all of the time, and sometimes I'll share them socially, but they don't often have a direct effect on what's going on with funeral directors here. And this one I wanted to share just for the picture that is attached to the story. So I'm definitely encouraging you to click the link in the show notes to go to the story about a funeral home that is on the lookout for a tandem hearse to fulfill a dead man's request for a final bicycle ride with his friends. So the gentleman booked his funeral in advance. He prepaid, and he arranged to have a tandem bike so that he could be ridden along. They have this 4-mile loop planned as part of his funeral celebration. And when he died, again, not funny because it didn't happen to me. I'm sorry, funny only because it didn't happen to me. The bike was in the shop. And so now a natural undertaking, which is one of those, one of the alternative funeral directors, like I like to talk about a lot in FSI, is running all over the country trying to get its hands on another tandem hearse. And I'm sure they're very hard to come by. But it's an interesting, proposition when you book something that specific. I don't know what a tandem hearse costs, but having a second one handy, if you're going to sell one, it reminds me when we went to Pennsylvania to cover the funeral of Stone Man Willie, who was an American mummy, and link to that in the show notes. And they had gotten a special motorcycle hearse for the procession, for the parade. There was a town parade, and the hearse died because it hadn't been used for too long, and there's not a second motorcycle hearse handy. For his actual burial, the funeral home got it together and got the motorcycle hearse up and running. But these are just some of the weird difficulties that arise that aren't anybody's fault and end up being, anecdotes, more than tragic stories. But I thought I'd share that with you. The tandem is, I think, what you would think it is. It's 2 people on one side and then a place for the coffin or a casket, and then they call them coffins still in the UK, and then another and then wheels to prop up the coffin. So link to that in the show notes. Check it out there. We at Kates-Boylston have an announcement to make this week, and that announcement is that we have formed an advisory board, and I'm going to read to you from our own release because I want to get it just right. The board's mission is to foster a dynamic exchange of knowledge and expertise, prioritizing innovative publication and educational opportunities to benefit the entire end-of-life community. This collaboration aims to spotlight emerging trends and transformations within the profession and identify how to best support professionals who serve families during their times of greatest need and grief. It goes on to have quotes from our publisher, Sophia Galler, about why it's important. This was her idea, and we were all really excited to hear it. And I'm really excited for this to kick off. One of the things I'd like to kind of preview for you is I'm going to do a bonus episode of FSI the podcast with each of the new members. So I think there are 12 people on there. So over the next 3 or 4 months, you'll get to know our advisory board. And if you don't want to say something to me, you are welcome to say something to them about the way that things are going on. We're pretty proud of the work we do. And if we do something that you like or that you dislike, we would love to know about it. And I think that this will provide us a better opportunity to go directly to a person and get their sense of it. We are one of, if not the only, one of the only purely independent news voices in the death care space. No one, I'm so fortunate. No one tells me what to write. No one makes me write anything. Nobody kills any of my stories if they're a little harsh, I guess, because I can do harsh stories sometimes. We live and die on our credibility, and our credibility depends heavily on our independence. And it's something the whole editorial team is really proud of, and I think that bears out in the work that we do. I really hope you get a kick out of the podcasts, and I'm really looking forward to 2026 because I think there's going to be a lot of really engaged and engaging opportunities to talk about this insanely fast changing industry. And, sorry, I forgot to say it, as if I need to. You can find the link to that in the show notes. And that will do it for this week. Thank you so much for joining me. Please subscribe wherever you're listening now. Follow if you're on Apple. If you watch us on YouTube, subscribe on YouTube as well. You'll get that notification. Plus, we put up lots of other videos. I did an interesting one with two of the people from Cadence, who's been in the news over and over and over again the last couple of weeks, mostly press releases, and I generally don't really read press releases on this show. But we're doing more with video. We had a conference in Houston in early November, and I'm currently editing the video on that. We're going to make available for people who weren't able to come to the conference. That'll actually be on our website, and you'll have to sign up to get access to it. But it's something we're going to be doing more and more of, and after 90 days, we drop everything back onto our YouTube channel. So if you missed a webinar a long time ago, you can check out everything from the last year or so is on our YouTube now, and we'll continue to do that going forward. I hope you guys had a great week. It is getting cold here in the Northeast, and I think it may stay that way for a while. Other than that, we will check in with you next time on In Case You Missed It.